Well, I wanted to give you confidence that you can move from an analog phone system to a digital Zoom phones production. And we recently went through this at our office, and I kind of headed up the project and couldn't really find anything on YouTube, just kind of going through the steps and talking about it. So I wanted to go over what we went through, and if it helps you, wonderful. So for the last 30 years, we've had an analog phone system, maybe 40 extensions, and with traditional plain old telephone phone lines. And we wanted to make the move to a VoIP system, voice over internet protocol, and did research, looked at several different providers, and we chose to go with Zoom. Made a spreadsheet of all the different factors as far as options that they presented, as well as the cost. And what I found was that the options seemed to be pretty much the same in all the, whether it was Teams or Ring Central or Vonage and some of the others. It seemed like they had the same features, or if they didn't have it right now, it was going to be rolled out. And at some point I decided I'm not going to do it on features. I'm going to look at reliability and support and cost. And so my spreadsheet, I had the different categories. I had talked to the different vendors, got the best pricing I could, and turns out our existing telephone system was cheaper by about 50% over going to the least expensive of the digital VoIP system. So that was just unique to us. We've had a good relationship with our phone company for a long time, and have driven down the cost through negotiations and their realization that the marketplace was changing, so fighting to keep that piece of the pie. We had a great pricing. So nevertheless, the features that are available that come with VoIP were just too much for us to walk away from. So we decided to go ahead and undertake the move to the VoIP, even though it was going to cost us maybe 50% more. And in absolute dollars, it really wasn't that big a deal. It's just frustrating to, did I say 50% more? 100% more. It's just frustrating to pay more for what was touted years ago as, hey, you get free phones on the internet, and you should pay for the internet, and the phone will work free on it. And it went from that, and plus no taxes. And so all that's gone. It's no longer no taxes, and it's no longer a free phone system. But that doesn't mean it's not a good system. In fact, there are some great advantages to it. Let's see. So did the spreadsheet, and what was important to me was to take it out beyond just, for instance, Zoom gave us, I don't recall if it was 3 months or 5 months worth of free service to initiate it. And so our first year total cost is going to be reasonable, but I took it out 5 years and 10 years to try to get in our mind, what is it really costing us going forward as compared to what we're doing now? And I think it's important to project that, because the hardware, for instance, if you're going to stick with physical phones, then that hardware purchase, you might amortize it over 3 or 4 years, and then you no longer have to buy it anymore. Those phones last a long, long time. And so, yes, you're going to have to throw out all your old landline type phones, analog phone system. They're not available for you. You'll go to VoIP system phones, and that might be $50 or $100 or $300 per unit, depending if you buy what features you buy, whether you buy new or used, and those type of things. But once you pay for them and amortize them out, then that's gone, and then you kind of get down to what's it cost per month compared to what our current system costs per month. So normal spreadsheet types of calculations, go through that. You should be able to figure out which one works best for you. A little point is, I believe right now Microsoft Teams and Zoom both pay 911 tax, and depending where you are, that might be, significant, or it might not be. Our case, it happened to be very significant, but in some places it might not be that much. But others do not do that, and so get that question answered and put that into your spreadsheet. Do they cover it or not, and how much is that? The other thing that's interesting, if you're coming from an analog background, is we're used to thinking, for instance, in my company, there's 30, 35 employees, and we have 10 phone lines. And that's all that's needed for incoming calls, outgoing calls. We never run out of lines because 35 people aren't on the phone all at the same time. So in our environment, we don't need one line per person. It's like how many lines you need to make sure that nobody gets a busy signal, if you're familiar with that term. But that there's always a line available, and whether incoming or outgoing. And for us, the sweet spot was 10 lines. When you go to a VoIP solution, that concept is gone. The new concept is each phone is a line, or each user is a line. It's kind of one-to-one relation there, and so, like in our case, we went to let's say it was 33 phone numbers, 33 lines, and back to that 911. So that's 33 times the 911 tax, as opposed to 10 times the 911 tax. But it's a whole different concept. And let's say, for round numbers, the digital supplier, your VoIP supplier, charges you $20 a line. And let's say there's 30 lines, so that'd be $600 a month for their service, and then plus taxes, So that's how the pricing works on the VoIP phones typically. There are some providers that will give you, maybe local suppliers in your city, that'll put in VoIP systems, which is just telephones going across the internet, and they're not related to the big players. They're independents, but they have the hardware, and they put that hardware on your premises. And so that's one of the choices you do have is, do I want to have my phone system on premises, or do I want it in the cloud? And where we have always had, and I think most users of the analog systems always had their PBX type equipment on premises, we opted to go with a cloud solution, which is the ones I've named off, or all that type of thing, where that transferring of calls, all that information isn't done on a box in your office, it's in the cloud. And so if power goes off to your building, you still have phone service via your cell phones, or and one thing about VoIP is your phone system isn't limited to your office. All your cell phones, everybody carries around, they could have a Zoom app on it, and they could make a call on that Zoom app, not on the phone itself, but within the app, using your phone system and reflecting your company's phone number to talk to a customer. And likewise, customers can call in. So the point was, power could go off to your building, but your phone system is still up and running other than if you have desk phones. Or even if you're using the phone on a computer sitting at your desk, power would be off there, so you wouldn't have it. But on cell phones, you would still have the cell phone network and the ability to get calls, get voicemails, and what have you. Okay, so you've decided on the provider and negotiated with them. One thing I would say is, I think is really important is negotiate for some amount of free time. And it's not so much the money savings as it reduces the pressure on you for a drop dead date where the phones have got to be working on this date. If you've given yourself 90, 120 days and you get working on it, you get the phones in, and all of a sudden your phone supplier says, "Oh, we can't get those," and delays. You don't quite understand it, and it takes a while to get training done. All those things, the pressure's off if you've gotten some lead time. So I'd really encourage you to negotiate that, because what will happen is your analog system is still going to be billing you until you port your main number over. And once you port your main number over, then all your phones are live on the VoIP system, and your old system is really of no value. You could call out as long as you're still paying your bill, but the phone call's coming in when it works. So get that lead time to take that pressure off. When you're working with Zoom, this is going to be Zoom in particular I want to talk to you about, is the way it was with me. I had a sales rep, talked to him, negotiated with him, came up with the pricing and the free. But to be honest, the first thing they did is they sent me a physical phone system. Came in a big suitcase via FedEx, and when I got it, opened it all up, and it had 2 phones and a switch, power over Ethernet switch. I think that's all it had. And so you got a Ethernet cable from your network, and you plugged it into the back of the switch, and then plugged the 2 telephones into that switch. The phones would get their power from that switch, which is the power over Ethernet feature, and then the phones already had phone numbers, and they were ready to go. At that point, I already they gave me the Zoom app, and they showed me where to go into the phone system, the phone administration, and so I could start practicing with it. Okay, I can make a user, I could set up this phone, and I could change the business hours, voicemail. I could practice on that, could call it from another phone. I could put my Zoom app on my phone and tie it to those new ones. So I was able to do a little bit of testing like that. So if you have trepidation about going this new route, I would encourage that. If you're comfortable with it, you don't have to go to that stage. But it was so new to me that I wanted to do that, and it was helpful. It gave me some confidence. It also let me test out a couple of brands of phone. I can't remember if it was Yealink or Polycom that they sent me, but it gave me an opportunity to look at that. I still didn't quite understand physical desk phones and the number of lines they had, and how all that interplayed, and it may be a little bit of a mystery to me right now. Even you could get 6-line phones or 12-line phones, and the concept is, I think it has more to do with how many phones you can put on your speed dial and how many you can monitor and view. Let's see. So then you have to, okay, so you've made the commitment, you've worked with Zoom, you've signed a contract, and you've gotten some kind of window to work within. So now you got to buy some hardware. We chose to go, I was going to buy new, then I talked to our IT guys, and they said, we've been using used phones for Polycom V411s, VX411s, I believe, for a long time, and we get used, and they've been really bulletproof and long. And it's like I'm used to buying used electronics, and so we went that route, and I'm glad we did. Saved a tremendous amount of money, and I mean, it just works. If you talk to different people in the industry, you'll find that some are very much wanting to replace an analog system, and so they want physical phones on the desk of all their people. But there's other companies that say, our desk phones, we went and spent all that money on desk phones, and all they do is collect dust, because all of our people now use their computers. And when the phone rings, their computer lights up, and incoming call, it has caller ID, tells them who's calling, and they take the call, and they talk to their computer screen. It's not a video chat. And that's one thing. On the Zoom phone, don't confuse it with the Zoom video. That's a different component of Zoom. Zoom phones is a separate component. And once you kind of get that out of your mind, that there's a connection, it helps you think about it. They're just a provider of phone service. And so, but back to my point is, there's a big school of thought of, you don't need no desk phones. Just tell your people, we're not doing it that way. There's two ways you can answer a phone: on your computer or on your cell phone. On your cell phone, there's a free app from Zoom, and when a receptionist sends you a phone call, your computer will ring and your cell phone will ring, if you configure it that way for simultaneous ring. And you can answer on either one you want. And or if they direct dial you. If you're coming from the analog system, we're not used to that. But in a VoIP system, every person that has a phone has a direct dial number. And so they don't even have to go to the receptionist anymore. They can just dial directly to you. As a person with that direct dial number, you can choose to show that and call on your caller ID when you make an outgoing call, or you can alternatively say, I don't want my personal DID number to be shown. I want it to show the company's phone number, and that's just a default setting. And say, what's the default number you want to do? On any particular call, you can toggle between the two and say, I want it to be the company number that's shown, or I want it to be my DID number. I think that's direct inward dial, but it's just your personal direct phone number. Okay, so you have to buy the phones. And so in our case, I bought maybe 30 phones, those used ones I talked about. But then I also had to buy a couple of phones for conference rooms, and then a phone for the receptionist, and sidecars for the receptionist. And there's going to be other people who say, we don't even have receptionists use physical phones. We have them use a desktop app, and I'm sure they're successful at that. We just, maybe in 5 years we'll move to that, but right now we just wanted phones to work, and we went with the physical phones, and people tend to be using those. So that's one part. So you've got your desk phones. You're going to get that, and then some of my people ask, I don't want a desk phone, but I do want a headset. And so I got some wireless headsets, and that's tied into their computer. And so they can walk away from their desk, halfway across the building, and still have connectivity with the phone call, and go back. It's a Bluetooth arrangement in that particular case. The other thing you'll want, so I told you in that example where they sent me the test stuff, you just plugged it into your network, and bingo, if you can get into the internet, you can use those phones. That's true. However, the suggested method is to create a virtual LAN and local area network called a VLAN. And so we chose to go that route, which means had to buy a $1,200 48 port VLAN switch, and so we plugged that into our network stack, and I took all the runs that go to everybody's different offices around the way and plugged it into that new network switch, the VLAN. And what that allows it to do is it still connects with all the other portions of the network, but you tell the phone, I want you not to be on the normal network, be on VLAN. I think ours was VLAN 21. And so we just had an IT company program that. It only took them a couple hours, and it was well worth it. So it was all set, and so it's a switch, and all the wires are plugged into it. So now let's picture in an office. You're sitting in your office. On the wall is an Ethernet port. The way it's typically configured with these internet phones is you plug a wire into the Ethernet port, and then it comes up to the phone, plugs into the phone, and then there's a port coming out of the phone, and you take a wire from that, and you plug that into whatever else is running in your office on the network. So your computer, for instance, and so you plug it into the computer, and so the phone goes directly into the wall, up to the VLAN switch, and out to the internet. And your computer goes through the wire, through your phone, not through the phone, but the switch in the back of the phone, and then out through your wall and up to the VLAN switch and onto the regular network. Your computer's not on the VLAN, it's on its regular LAN. They run concurrently side by side within the same wires, but they're on a separate network. And the way they configure that for quality of service is to give priority to phone traffic, and the whole purpose of the VLAN is for quality of service, so that your phone calls are the best that they can be, and whatever reasons they're not running well isn't because you haven't put all the odds in the favor within your network. Any phone call is only as good as the weakest point. And so if you have that VLAN, and quality of service settings, and you've optimized that, but you have a very slow internet connection, you can have a degradation of performance because of that bottleneck. And so you want to have a substantial internet service. But then what happens is somebody might report, oh, I had a bad phone call, and I couldn't hear the other side. The question becomes, well, is that our system? Is it Zoom? Or is it the other person's phone system or their provider? And you really don't know the answer to that. I guess the only way you would know is if it frequently happened, and with different people on different networks. And it's like, what's the common denominator here? It's us. We're having drop calls over and over again. And that's not been the case, but that would be how you would troubleshoot that, is just a frequency and with different parties on the other side. It's like, it must be us because it's happening with us no matter who we call to. But if you call one person and every time you call that person you have trouble, it's likely on their end, not yours. So you're having to buy that VLAN switch. Let me back up. You don't have to buy it. This stuff will work without it. And it may be that you want to say, I'm going to just try it without that. And, I don't know that there's a downside to trying it that way, other than maybe the frustration if it doesn't work. I'd rather do it right the first time. I think it's worth it, and the headache will be, you will have done your job is to get it optimized as much as possible within a reasonable budget. And because you're talking a long-term phone system here, so $1,000 for a switch and a couple hours of an IT person's time to configure it for quality of service and to set it up, I think it's money well spent. Let's see. I talked about power over Ethernet. That's a little bit nicer. There's times where you'll have a phone sitting and it's not near a power outlet, because all these phones don't have to be powered by the Ethernet cable. They could be powered by a power supply. As long as you've got access to an outlet, you could plug the power supply in the outlet and just plug the phone in. And so you would plug the phone into the outlet for power. You would still need an Ethernet cable to get to your network, but you wouldn't even need the PoE switch, power over Ethernet switch. That thing I told you costs $1,000. You wouldn't even need that if every single phone had a power supply. And in an office situation, you often have access to outlets. But there's other situations where I need a phone over here, and I can get the Ethernet cable there, but there's not a power supply over there. And so that would be a situation where it would be particularly useful to have power over Ethernet. So one other avenue around that is you could buy a little 4-port power over Ethernet switch. And so if you have one of those situations like talk about where you need a phone that you can get Ethernet to but not power to, you could put one of those little PoE switches between that back downstream where you have power, and then just send a wire up to that particular phone wherever it is. So that's an option as well. Your box of phones from the phone supplier. So there's a box of 30 phones. How do you go about setting it up? Well, you could put each of those phones in 30 different locations. But what you have to do is each phone has to be provisioned for each user. And so the phone that sits on my desk, I can't just take that 4 offices over, put it in theirs and think it'll work fine for them. No, it's still my phone. And so if somebody was going to buzz my extension, it would buzz 4 offices over, because that phone is my phone. So the point is, each phone has to be configured for each user. Well, I think for simplicity's sake, don't go install 30 phones in 30 different locations and then have to go to 30 different spots and configure them. Take the first one out of the box, plug it into to an Ethernet cable, and start your provisioning. And then provision it, set it aside, put a label on it who that belongs to, get the next one, provision it, move it over, and then you provision the phones that way, all sitting at one location. And then you could take them out and plug them into the different locations. Provisioning a phone really, I found kind of challenging. There's several different layers to it. And so the phone, you have to tell the phone that, hey, you're going to belong to Zoom now. And so that's one thing that you have to tell it. And then once you do that, then you have to assign it a phone number, which actually that's what tells it that it belongs to the Zoom network. And so you have to get in there and you boot it up, and then you interrupt the boot, and you put in the admin code, and then you put in the phone number, and then you back out, reboot it again, then it sees that phone number and goes out and phones home, so to speak, and talks to Zoom and says, okay, here's where I am. And they already know that phone number is associated with you. So back on when you signed up with Zoom, one of the things they're going to do is say, before you get started, we're going to have you talk with one of our engineers, and they'll just talk you through the admin of your company, and they'll help you set up the admin. So you get on the website, and the Zoom website, your own particular portal on Zoom, and there's an admin. You click admin, and then you click phones, and it says phone admin, and you can right there, set up users, and then you could set up, so you set up all your users, say there's 30 users, and then you click on devices, and then you set up physical phones if you have them. Not everybody, like I said, not everybody uses physical phones, but then you set up the physical phones, and you assign the phone a phone number, and you're doing all this in the admin. When you do that, then back to that thing I was telling you, you give the phone a phone number, it phones home, and it goes through the internet and goes and to the Zoom servers, and they see that you've assigned that to, Mary Smith, and so they know, and it'll reboot, and all of a sudden it'll say Mary Smith on it, and so it's then provisioned. I filmed some of the provisioning aspects of it. There's a few more steps in that. It's if you're the person that sets up printers or sets up new computers in your office, it is doable. It just, if you give yourself time and think it through, the software is makes sense, and as long as everything works. I will admit that we got used phones, and I got, out of the 30, I got 2 that wouldn't work, and they had remnants of a previous system in there, and I could never get rid of it. And people we bought it from, they took it back and replaced them. It wasn't an issue, but it was just kind of frustrating because I barely knew what I was doing, and then to have the problem be the phone, I wasn't picking up on that. I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? But that it's a time-consuming, and it's just, you just have to really concentrate and get it through. But then you get rolling, and then when you're done, you're an expert, and then you'll never use it again because it's only a one-time thing. Or I guess if you ever get a new employee and they're not going to use somebody else's phone, you'll have to pull those skills up again. But it's one of those things, you do it and you finally get good, and then you're never going to do it again. So one of the things that I was telling you is when you talk to that Zoom technician that first time, sometime in that process, they'll say, you need to go get phone numbers, and you can choose the phone numbers you want. Typically you want it in the same area code you're in, just so that it'll have that familiarity to your customers. And then you get to choose from numbers that they have available, and so, but then you choose them, and so you might choose 30 or 100 or 4, whatever your contract calls for. You select those numbers, and those become available numbers, and those are the numbers you'll assign to users and devices. Using that phone app in Zoom, it's pretty good. You'll set up users, and then you'll set up the phone devices, and sometimes it's confusing. It's like, where do I find this one? So if you were going to set a voicemail up, do you set that up on the device, or do you set it up on the user? And speaking of voicemail, it's kind of a fun process. If you go to the voicemail, you set it up. One of the things you can do is, instead of each person recording their voicemail message like traditional, you can type out what you want it to say, and then you can let Zoom has digital voices that'll speak what you typed. And you could choose the different ones, different accents, different, a male or female, and, kind of young or old, and there's a lot of interesting ones. But by doing that, I was able to type everybody's voicemail, choose one presenter, and so we have this consistent voice that speaks, sorry, Jeff White is unavailable right now. Please leave a message to prompt or hit 0 to return to the receptionist. So I type that out, and then just copied and pasted it into each user's and just changed from my name to their name and each different one, and then all the voicemails set up. So we're able to roll this out without all these users having to go in there and record a message and what have you. Now they still have that option to do that. However, it's not required. It's ready to roll as it is. Call handling is a complex thing, and it's something you'll want to spend some time kind of thinking through and talking to that Zoom technician and say, explain to me how this works, because for instance, if you put work hours of 8 to 5 and somebody in your office wants to call you at 5:05, if they call over to you and your work hours are 8 to 5, it goes right to voicemail, even if you're sitting at your desk. It's like, I don't want that. And so you might lengthen your work hours. We have chosen, and it may not be the best solution, but we just 24/7 is what our work hours are. Because, and here's the theory, is if somebody buzzes over and I'm sitting at my desk at 5:05, I want to hear it. But let's say I wasn't. Let's say I had gone home. Well, what's the worst that happens? It rings 4 or 5 times and it goes to voicemail. And so the only difference that I can discern is that it rang 5 times as opposed to going directly to voicemail. And by ringing 5 times, because I told you that I've set it up for simultaneous rings, so that means if I'm on my way home, driving home, and somebody calls, let's say it was 5:15, and it rings, it'll ring at my desk phone, it'll ring at my desk computer, but it'll also ring at my cell phone. And so I could be driving down the road and then I would pull off and answer. And I can answer just as if I was sitting there, because I didn't put in those work hours. If I put in the work hours, it would go just to voicemail and I'd never even get an opportunity to answer. So that's why we've chosen to do that. Then there's the whole issue of transferring calls, and there's 2 methods. It's called warm transfer and cold transfer. Warm transfer would be the receptionist or whoever's transferring the call would buzz in to the person that they want to transfer the call to and say, Mr. Jones, Mary Smith is on the line. You want to take it? Sure, send it in. And then they would hit transfer, and that call would become live on that phone. So that's a warm transfer. A cold transfer is Mary Smith calls receptionist and asks for Mr. Jones. Sorry, I'm getting these names mixed up. And they say, okay, hold on just a second. And they do a cold transfer to Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones' phone will start ringing, and it'll say Mary Smith. And he can just pick up and say, this is Mr. Jones. Or he can just let it go to voicemail. He could choose, but there is no receptionist having a dialogue with them about who's on the phone and what their issue is. And so cold or warm transfer, you'll have to figure out which works best for you, and it may work some for some, warm for some and cold for others. So there's an app on your phone. It's an excellent app. I was really concerned about it, but it rings just like, it's a little different ring than your cell phone, so you immediately know it's not your phone ringing. For instance, let's say you have an iPhone. When somebody calls your iPhone, of course, it's the iPhone that's ringing. But when somebody calls you and your Zoom app rings, that's really going through the internet and going through that app. It's a program running on your phone, which is a computer, and so it's the app on the phone that's ringing. But it rings audibly, and but it interfaces very well, because it comes to the forefront of your phone and shows who's calling, and you have a few options of taking it or declining it, and that sends them to voicemail. But it's not like you have to flip, 3 screens to find your Zoom app, open it up, and and then try to answer it all before it goes to voicemail. It's nothing like that. It's on your phone on the forefront, and so it runs. Let's talk about that. Your Zoom app on your phone, it needs to be running in order for it to ring. If you don't have that Zoom app running in the background, then it won't answer because it's not running. So where that comes into play, if you reboot your phone, you want to make sure you restart your Zoom app. But it takes very little battery power. You won't notice any drain for it running in the background. In addition, this Zoom phone has the ability of text messaging, SMS, and so people can text you on the Zoom app, and so you could. It's an interesting way of not having people text you on your personal device. They're texting you within to that DID number, and so it's all within the Zoom office grouping there, and so they don't. Your texts on your personal phone aren't mixed with business. That's over on the cell phone. On the Zoom app. Let's see. There's an app for PCs. I assume there is on the Mac as well, but I believe it is the same app as the video Zoom, but you just click on, there's a little phone icon, you click on the phone and it takes you to the portion of the app that deals with the phone. So you click phone, and then there's some tabs up there that says history and voicemail and SMS and lines, I think. There's 4. One of the things you're offered to do is add your personal contacts to that, and so perhaps dialing out might be a little easier on the Zoom app if you do that. I'm not convinced that's the best way. It seems like caller ID shows up pretty well without tying into your contacts on the phone, so you need to experiment with that. There's a thing called Busy Lamp Field, and for some offices where there's an assistant outside the office of an executive, and the phone call comes in, that assistant may want to know if that executive is on the phone or not. And they have a thing called Busy Lamp Field where you could set it up where that assistant can monitor and see whenever this person picks up the phone, a light picks up here. And so they have some knowledge about what's happening there. It also serves as a shortcut. They just press that and it buzzes right in there. Another interesting thing is, I told you everybody has their individual phone numbers, but you also have extensions. And so we maintained our normal extensions, and many of us already know the extension numbers from years of use of our old system, so we just use the same extension numbers. But if you dial that 3-digit extension into your Zoom phone, it makes a phone call to those people. And you don't have to dial 7 digits or 10 digits, you just do those 3 and it calls them just as if you're making a phone call. There's favorites and some things like that. So the software has a lot of options, and I think the thing that attracted us most was being able to get business calls not sitting at your desk, where your cell phone could, the app on your cell phone could receive calls as if you're sitting there. And so you might not even be in the office. You might have taken the day off, and the receptionist or somebody could transfer a call to you. They don't even have to know whether you're in your office. You don't have to report and say, I'm going to be out for a couple hours. Your phone will ring, and then you could choose to ignore it or pick it up. You may look at it and say, God, that's a call I've been waiting for. Say it was Friday, at 7 o'clock at night, and you took that call, and it just was so vital of information that you wouldn't have wanted to wait till Monday, and just that feature alone is huge. You're waiting for a call, and they never even have to know that you're not at the office. Okay, so I think I covered most of what I wanted to as far as just giving you confidence that you can do it. It doesn't take a huge computer person to be able to do it. If you encourage you to negotiate time so that you're not under a time crunch, and just do it. It's proven. We're pretty happy with it. There's still a little trepidation on some of the users, but when it really comes down to it, the phone rings, you pick it up and say hello. It's we've got it down, so it's not scary in that respect. The other thing about voicemail that we like is if somebody leaves you a voicemail, the software program will email a text of that voicemail to you, transcript, I guess is the proper term, a transcript of that voicemail to you, and the WAV file. And so you could double click on it and listen, but it is so nice. Just get that voicemail, and then you can read it, and you can, it's just a car warranty call, or, oh, okay, I've been waiting for that call, and you can respond to it. And so that's an excellent feature. And it's not unique to Zoom, but it works very well in Zoom. So it's exciting technology, and call quality has been, it's good. Sometimes it seems a little quiet, and analog was, fantastic, just great quality, and so it's a very high bar to compare against, but it's not bad. It's at times better maybe than even the analog, and just crystal clear. But there's other times where it's not, and like I've said, well, who is that? Is that our system? Is it theirs? And as more and more people are in the VoIP world, you don't know if it's them, if it's you, but it's ready for prime time. It's nothing to be concerned about as far as quality of service. It works. The worst can happen, maybe you have to call back and have another thing. I haven't had to do that. Somebody in our office at one time had a bad connection, and they had to call back and reconnect. And it's been about a month now that we've been doing it. So they've had one time where, I can't hear you type of situation. And again, was that us or was that them? Don't know. But I consider that a reasonable amount of glitches. So your phones on our old system would work even if the internet was down. That's not the case any longer. If the internet is down, then your phone's down. Fortunately, we've had very reliable internet service, and we do have a backup internet as well. And so we're kind of controlled that. But if the internet was down, could you still have phone service? And the answer is yes, because it's not related to your building. It's in the cloud. And so your cell phone would still be able to get the office calls. I talked about that, the calls that come into our receptionist, that's just the way we have it set up. But I can make any extension the receptionist. And so it can, instead of ringing, to that person, if they are on vacation or sick, I could have it ring somewhere else. Well, I hope this has been useful. When I went into this Zoom phone thing, I didn't find anybody that kind of talk through how does this work. It just seemed very scary, and I couldn't see the full picture. So I hope this helps you kind of get your arms around the different aspects of it, hardware and software, and what you have to do. And it's quite doable. So the worst you're going to have is a problem, and so you solve it. You call somebody, and there's people out there to help. You get on YouTube and double check there. You call Zoom, and I would encourage you to find out from Zoom. It's like, if I have a problem, who do I call? And get clear insight on that. I'll be honest, I didn't do that well. I believed in myself too much, and so I kind of glossed over that. So I didn't know exactly who to call. And but like I said, I worked through all the issues pretty much on my own, and because it's put together well, and so it's, if you sit there and you think it through, you can kind of see how it all interplays. And I had a good foundation with that first call with the technician, and that kind of gave us a good foundation to roll it out. And then it's just a matter of, it took some time to get it. But then the last thing you have to do is port over your number, and that's so that your phone number that goes to your business will now start ringing on the Zoom phones, and you do that right from your application on the Zoom app. In your admin, you just go there and you choose port the number. You tell what number you want to port, and you kind of choose a time. It's like as soon as possible, or I can't remember what the options are, but it seemed like you could specify a date. But my understanding, it takes at least a week, and it can take up to a month, at least a week, but it could take up to 3 weeks. And the reason is, Zoom does their part right away. I mean, that's just, a computer putting out the request, but that request goes to your phone company, and then your phone company has to get that request and give it to somebody, and then they have to go over there and do whatever they do to say, we no longer have this phone number. It now belongs to Zoom, and whatever they have to do to do that, it's dependent on a third party, and so that's why Zoom can't say, we'll do it this thing. In our case, I told you it's a minimum of a week. Well, it happened in 5 days, and so one thing, I had a receptionist that was going to be going on vacation, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to port the number until she's back from vacation, because I can't tell what day this thing's going to happen. And sure enough, I thought it was going to happen on the Monday, but it actually happened on a Thursday night before. And so it happened, and I got an email from Zoom saying it's been ported. And before I could tell her that it had been ported, her Zoom phone was ringing. So the porting is interesting. It's like everybody's got to be ready and trained. And then you do have to train your users, and I just did a few videos, and I did little 30-second videos. Here's how you answer a phone. Here's how you get your voicemail. And then I just made those available on the network, and told everybody, you need to, and I told them several times. But the phones are pretty simple and intuitive, so it just, they didn't even have to watch the videos. The phone rang, they picked it up, said hello. And, or they walked in and said, Jeff, how do you check for voicemail? I was like, okay, you hit that mail envelope icon, and then it says, what's your ID? And which, again, you put in their ID number when you set them up as user. I use the same codes that they're used to, and which made the transition easier. Okay. Good luck. You can do it. Thanks for watching.